Okay, right, welcome back, Year 6. Welcome to our next online reading session, and we are going to do something slightly different this week. We're going to have a look at a biography. Okay, so we've done quite a lot of narratives over the past couple of weeks, so I thought I'd change it up with a non-fiction text on our biography. And we're going to have a look at the biography of a man called Tim Berners-Lee. Okay, now, I have given you a little clue on the title slide as to what Tim Berners-Lee was famous for. Obviously, you're going to find out as we read through his biography, but just take a second, have a look at those pictures, have a think about what you think he might be to do with. Okay, see if you can spot any clues in that title picture as to what Tim Berners-Lee was involved in or what he was famous for. Okay. Right, Tim Berners-Lee. Nowadays, it is hard to imagine a world without the internet. In fact, most of your parents grew up in a time when the idea of sending information from one computer to another was like something out of a science fiction film. Okay, so clearly we've got a clue that Tim Berners-Lee is involved in the internet in some way. Okay, you might have guessed that from the pictures. We definitely know it now because of the starter sentence. Okay, so it's gone straight in with the fact that this biography is to do with the internet. So Tim Berners-Lee is clearly a key part of the internet or something that is involved in the internet. Okay, and then it goes on to talk about just how amazing the internet is and how the fact that actually before it was invented, it was something out of a science fiction film. So that's almost saying like it was so above what anyone else would think that they couldn't even comprehend that it could be real. Okay, so thinking about science fiction films, they are films where something happens and people go, no, that could never actually happen in real life. Okay, so things like time travel and things like that are things from science fiction film. They're things that we always think about and we always wish could happen, but we don't actually see a way of them ever happening. So the internet, before it was designed and invented, was obviously thought of something that could never ever happen in real life, but clearly it did. The idea of a network connecting lots of systems is actually 100 years old or so. Okay, so the idea of a network, so a network means linking lots and lots of different things together, is an idea that has only been around for 100 years or so. Okay, it's obviously much newer. The internet in terms of a network is much newer than 100 years. It's about 30 years old, but the idea of it has been around for 100 years. But it wasn't until the creation of something called ARPANET in the late 1960s that it became a reality. Okay, so we've got this idea that a network connecting lots of systems was an idea, so not in practice and not actually real, but it's an idea from hundreds of years ago. But it was the creation of something called ARPANET in the late 1960s that meant it could actually start to become real. Okay, so it became a reality, start to become real. ARPANET, so this, that's referring to ARPANET, was a basic system that allows two computers to send a very simple message. The first message was log in and it crashed the system after 2 letters. Okay, so a very basic system, a very simple system, the ARPANET, the startings of the internet, was a very simple system that allowed 2 computers to link up and send a very simple message. Okay, so you've got that sort of beginning idea that you can link systems. Okay, it only worked with 2 computers, and when they first tried it, they tried to send a 5-letter word and it crashed after 2 letters. Okay, so you can see how much work had to go in to make the internet that you and I know today actually become a reality. When we think of the internet now, most of us think of what is actually called the World Wide Web. Okay, so there you go, a bit of information you may not have known. The internet and the World Wide Web are 2 different things. Okay, this was the brainchild of a great British software engineer called Tim Berners-Lee. Okay, so now we find out what Tim Berners-Lee was famous for. So the World Wide Web, okay, not the internet, it's referring to the World Wide Web. World Wide Web was the brainchild, so that means the idea that he thought of Tim Berners-Lee. Okay, and he was a British software engineer, which means we know he's from Britain, and he was involved in computer software, so designing things for computers. He has been working for CERN in Geneva when he had the idea of a global network that would allow scientists and researchers to share information easily. Okay, so it started as an idea just to allow scientists or people who are completing research to share their ideas. Okay, and the fact that it says a global network, he's talking about linking lots and lots of different computers and different systems across the world. Okay, so we've got global network, and he had the idea to link all of their information so it would be much easier to share their thinking. Okay, and obviously once you share your thinking, you're much more likely to be able to make a breakthrough. It was 1989 when Tim Berners-Lee published a paper that explained how the modern World Wide Web would work. He was also responsible for creating the first web browser. Okay, so not until 1989, okay, not that long ago, where he published a paper. So he published his research and explained how he thought a modern World Wide Web would work. Okay, and he's also the man who created the first web browser. On the 6th of August 1991, he launched the very first web page. It was very simple. Its only job was to show people what the World Wide Web was about and how they could start to build their own web pages. Okay, so 6th of August 1991. All right, we're talking 28 years ago, give or take, 29 years ago. Okay, and he launched his first web page. So when obviously you go onto a web page, so let's say Google is a web page, okay, Facebook is a web page. He launched the first web page, and all it did was explain to you what the World Wide Web was and how you could start your own web page. That's the only two things it did. Okay, so I'm imagining sort of a blank white screen just saying the World Wide Web is, you can make a web page by doing this. So very, very simple. Okay, but it was the start. It's hard to imagine that something that started with just one single page has grown into the massive web that it is today in only 30 years. Okay, so in 30 years' time, it has gone from that one page on the World Wide Web to thousands and millions and trillions of pages of information and different things that you can do. Okay, so it is quite incredible thinking about how much the World Wide Web has grown. It's sometimes very easy to confuse the internet with Tim Berners-Lee's World Wide Web. Perhaps an easy way to remember it is that the internet is like a series of roads. Okay, so we're going to get an analogy here because, like I said, it is very simple to confuse the internet, which is the whole thing of everything that we do on a computer or a game console or anything that uses a network that connects things. Okay, that's the internet. Whereas the World Wide Web is just the web pages and the things that you can read and find. Okay, so there's a difference. So easy analogy to try and get your head around that is to think of the internet as a series of roads. Okay, so think of it as lots and lots of different roads going to different directions, like going to different places. The World Wide Web is just one way to use those roads. Perhaps imagine it as cars. Okay, so the World Wide Web is one way of using the internet. It is not the whole internet. It's not everything that you can do on the internet. It is one thing you can do. Okay, so that's the cars on our road. You also have other things that use the internet. So email, for instance, is not involved in the World Wide Web. It's something different. It uses a different road. So that might be the lorries on our roads. Okay, streaming films on your TV might be motorbikes. Okay, they all use the same roads, the internet, but they do it in different ways. Okay, and not all of them are part of the World Wide Web. So there is a difference between the whole of the internet and the World Wide Web, which is just one part of it. Nowadays, Berners Lee is the director of the World Wide Web Consortium. Okay, so after creating the World Wide Web, he has now become the director, so the person in charge of the World Wide Web's consortium. This is an organisation that he created to help decide on important issues with the web. Okay, so he's created an organisation who look after and manage the World Wide Web. You may not notice it, but the World Wide Web is always changing how it works. The changes make it more efficient or easier to access, or sometimes more stable or harder to hack into. Okay, so this committee that he has created are constantly working to improve the World Wide Web that he created. So they make it more efficient, so faster, okay, easier to access, so easier for people to get on and explore, or they are working to make sure that it is more stable, so less likely to go wrong, or harder to hack into, so harder for people to use it in the wrong way. Okay, so they're constantly working to make sure that they've improved it. So every time you type the www in your website address, remember that it stands for World Wide Web. And remember to think about the brilliant Tim Berners-Lee who helped to make it all possible. Okay, so Tim Berners-Lee, designer of the World Wide Web. The author clearly thinks of him as quite a positive person because he's described him as brilliant. Okay, so you can see that the author has put his own opinion right in the end there of what he thinks of what Tim Berners-Lee did. But some interesting information there about the man who created the World Wide Web. Okay, so as always, you have a couple of tasks that I would like you to complete based on this reading that we have discussed. Okay, so task 1, write down all of the things you use the internet for. Okay, so think about during a day, what are all the things that you use that would use the internet? Okay, and I want you to decide, do they use the internet or do they specifically use the World Wide Web? Okay, so are they one of those things that uses the roads on the internet in a different way, or do they specifically use the World Wide Web? Okay, now obviously lots of things we use both, because if you're using the World Wide Web, you're also using the internet. But I want you to see if you can find anything that just uses the internet, but not the World Wide Web. Okay, so I want you to see if you can find the difference. Then you've got task 2, so some vocabulary questions. Task 3 is some fact retrieval questions, and task 4 is some inference questions. Okay, and then once you've worked through them, be sure to share them on Twitter or share them with your class teachers. We are always looking to see what you are up to at home. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed that, and I will speak to you soon. Bye, guys.